Video we are talking about the circulatory system, the different parts of the circulatory system, the blood vessels, the heart which acts as the pump, the valves, and we are going to understand how to identify the different parts of the heart in the images and diagrams given. We will also learn to identify the valves. There are tricks which I am going to share with you which will help you remember the flow of blood. We'll talk about the relative thickness of ventricle and atria, muscular walls. We will talk about septum, and we will talk about the functioning of heart in terms of the contraction of muscles of atria and ventricles. So let's get started. So first of all, heart is the major organ which forms a part of the circulatory system. And as the name suggests, circulatory system, the function of the circulatory system is to transport substances from one part of the body to another part. So heart is the major organ which acts as the pump. It provides pressure to the blood so that the blood keeps flowing. So heart is the major organ. There are three types of blood vessels. There are veins, which in this diagram are shown in blue color. Veins carry blood towards the heart. Okay, they carry blood to the heart. Arteries shown in red color here, they carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. So remember, A for arteries, A for away. There are smaller blood vessels called capillaries, the tinier ones. Their main function is to allow exchange of substances between the blood and the surrounding tissues. Heart and veins, both of them have valves. Their function is to ensure one-way flow of blood and to prevent the backflow of blood. So this is the basic idea about the circulatory system. Now about the heart as an organ. It's an organ made up of muscles, and these muscles are special type of muscles which are called as cardiac muscles. They, because they are made up of muscles, they are made up of muscle cells. There will be a need to supply blood, oxygenated blood to these muscles. So that function is performed by coronary arteries. So if the question is asked, you have to mention heart muscles. Coronary arteries transport oxygenated blood to the heart muscles. Don't say just the heart, because otherwise even there are other blood vessels which supply blood to the heart. So coronary arteries specifically take care of the heart muscles which make the heart. Okay, so that's okay. So now let's talk about the structure of the heart. First of all, you must know that whenever we are looking at any organ in biology, the on your right hand side it is always left of the organ, and on your left hand side is the right of the organ. So that is why you see here they have written left, left. Okay, second thing, you must remember that left side of the heart will always carry only oxygenated blood. So it receives oxygenated blood and it pumps oxygenated blood. Right side of the heart will only carry deoxygenated blood. So it will receive deoxygenated and it will pump also deoxygenated. Now looking at the structure, so this is the important muscle which is called as septum, which is like a wall. It's a muscular wall which separates the left of the heart from the right of the heart. Now because left side of the heart carries oxygenated blood and right carries deoxygenated, so the main function of septum is to prevent the mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. It separates the left and right of the heart. Now, to remember the whole structure of the heart, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind. I'll give you a lot of tricks here. First of all, there are 4 chambers. Okay, there are 4 blood vessels, and there are 4 valves that you need to remember. So, starting with the chambers, there are 4 chambers. The upper chambers are called atria. Now here I am seeing atria. Here they have written atrium. So atria is the plural word. If I'm referring to both the chambers together, then I say atria. If I'm referring to an individual chamber, if they ask you to label, there's a line given, a label line given, and they ask you to label, then you will label it as atrium. So the upper chambers are atria and the lower chambers are ventricles. How will you remember this? Remember, in English alphabet, letter A comes before letter V. So atria are the upper chambers, V ventricles are the lower chambers. Okay, this is another tip. Now, there are, if you remember the left and right, so both of them are very easy to identify now. On the right of the heart will be right atrium, the upper side. So these are the four chambers. Okay, these are the four chambers. 1, 2. These are the upper chambers. So right atrium and left atrium. The lower two chambers, 3, 4. The lower chambers. Both of them are ventricle. This will be right of the heart, so right ventricle. This is left of the heart, so left ventricle. So just four chambers. So if they give you any diagram for identification, I suggest you first start by identifying the chambers. Second important trick. Remember, there are four chambers and four blood vessels. That means every chamber is connected to just one blood vessel. Okay, another trick, remember, if you are talking about a particular atrium, both the atriums are connected to veins. Okay, so A, V, and both the ventricles are connected to arteries. So VA, there's a lot of AV, VA in the whole structure of the heart. So both the atrium connected to veins, both the ventricles connected to arteries. Okay, now let's see. Right atrium is the first chamber like when the blood enters the heart, right atrium is the first chamber that receives the blood. So atrium connected to vena cava vein, which is the major vein, which will bring deoxygenated blood from the other veins in the body. So this deoxygenated blood first goes to the right atrium. After this, we have right ventricle. Now this ventricle V, so it has to be connected to an artery. So right ventricle is also carrying deoxygenated blood. So deoxygenated blood has to go to the lungs for oxygenation. So who will take that? The pulmonary artery, because it is going to the lungs. Remember, if related to the lungs, that word is pulmonary. So this right ventricle connected to pulmonary artery. Third chamber, which is the left atrium. Now atrium, so it has to connect to a vein. So that's the pulmonary vein, because this will receive oxygenated blood from the lungs. So that is why pulmonary. Now the last chamber, which is the left ventricle. Now this is V, so it has to connect to an A, which is the aorta, that is the major artery. So right atrium connected to vena cava, right ventricle connected to pulmonary artery, left atrium connected to pulmonary vein, left ventricle connected to aorta. Okay, so A, V, V, A. That is about the blood vessels and the connecting chambers. Now let's talk about the valves. Now again, this is very easy to remember. There are four valves actually, but like chambers, there are only two names that you need to remember. So which ones are those? This one over here and this one over here. Okay, now let me make it even more simpler for you. Where are the valves present in the heart? The first set of valves are present at the entry of the ventricle. So because there are two ventricles, there will be one at the entry. So this is the first valve which is at the entry. This is your ventricle, right? This is the right ventricle. This is the left ventricle. So first valve at the entry of the right ventricle. This is also another valve at the entry of the left ventricle. So these two valves, because they are present between the atria. See, this is the right atrium. This is the left atrium. They connect the atria to the ventricle. That is why they are called as atrioventricular valves. Atrioventricular. Okay, because they are between the atria and ventricle. So that is at the entry. You don't need to remember the tricuspid, bicuspid. Only atrioventricular is sufficient for IGCSE Biology and IGCSE Coordinated Sciences. So that is the first set of valve, atrioventricular. Second set of valve is at the exit of the ventricle. Okay, so the exit of the ventricle. First set at the entry, second set at the exit of ventricle. So now ventricles, connect to the respective arteries. So this is the exit of the right ventricle, which is what allows the blood to flow to the pulmonary artery. So there's a valve here. And this is the exit of left ventricle, which is where it is connected to the aorta. So there's a valve here, there's a valve here. Both of them are called as semilunar valve. Both of them are semilunar. So semilunar at the exit of the ventricle, both the ventricles, and atrioventricular at the entry of ventricles. So that is the position of valves. And one line standard answer, if they ask about the valves anywhere, you just have to say they prevent backflow of blood. That's it. Okay, so we discussed about the 4 chambers, 4 blood vessels, 4 valves. Now let's move on to the flow of heart. Now I already told you the flow of the heart. This is another trick. This, if you write VA 4 times, that is the exact order in which the blood is flowing through the heart. So blood enters the heart through vena cava. Then it goes to the right atrium. After A, there's a V. It goes to the right ventricle. After V, there has to be an A, pulmonary artery. Then from pulmonary artery, it is supplied to the lungs. In the lungs, blood will become oxygenated, and that oxygenated blood now flows back to the heart through the pulmonary vein. Next, blood will go to the left atrium. After atrium, it is connected chamber, the left ventricle, and finally out of the heart through aorta. Okay, so there is this, all these is VA 4 times. If I show you here again, the blood will enter the heart through vena cava, the first chamber, which is the right atrium. Then through this atrioventricular valve, it goes into the right ventricle. From right ventricle, it goes to the pulmonary artery and then goes to the lungs. After it gets oxygenated in the lungs, it will come back to the heart through pulmonary vein. So pulmonary vein takes the blood to the left atrium. Now this is oxygenated blood. Again through atrioventricular valve, it goes into the left ventricle. Oxygenated blood is then supplied to the aorta through this semilunar valve here, and aorta will take it to the whole body. So that is the flow of blood. So if they ask an explain question, then you have to also talk about the contraction of the heart muscles. If they just say describe the pathway, then you just mention the parts of the heart through which the blood flows. Okay, so before we start discussing about the cardiac cycle, we need to understand the pressure generated in the atria and the ventricles, which is related to the muscle thickness of the atria and ventricle. I already told you that atria are the receiving chambers, right? So they just receive the blood and they have to push the blood to the ventricle, which is right below it, right? So mostly atria are the receiving chambers and ventricles are the pumping chambers. So they need to pump the blood out of the heart, right? They pump the blood out. Right ventricle will pump the blood to the lungs and left ventricle will pump the blood to the whole body. Atria are just the receiving chambers. So that is why the muscles, the muscular wall which is present around the atria, see this wall thickness of the atria is lesser than the muscular thickness of the ventricular walls, because atria don't need to generate a lot of pressure. They are mostly receiving chambers. So they have very thin muscular walls. Ventricles are the pumping chambers. They need to pump the blood out of the heart. So they need more muscles in their walls so that when the muscles will contract, a greater force, a greater pressure can be generated. But right ventricle pumps the blood to the lungs which are close to the heart. So there is no need to generate a lot of pressure. But left ventricle has to pump the blood to the entire body, to all the extremities of the body. So left ventricle needs to generate greatest pressure. That is why out of the two ventricles, right ventricle has thinner walls compared to the left ventricle, which will have the thickest walls. So left ventricle has the thickest muscles here, more maximum muscles, so that muscles will contract with a greater force and a good amount of pressure. A high pressure can be generated, which is good enough to allow the blood to circulate throughout the body. Now, this part you have to remember when we are talking about the cardiac cycle, because there are pressure changes, which you need to relate it to the thickness of the walls of the atria and ventricle. So here, if you see on the x-axis, 1, 2, 3 and again 1, 2, 3. So that means there is an event which is happening again and again. So cardiac cycle is a series of events which repeats. Okay, so 1, then 2, then 3 and then again 1. Okay, so it's a cycle which allows the blood, different chambers, atria and ventricle will contract and will allow the blood to flow, which will allow the valves to open and close at different times. So let's understand. On the y-axis, we have taken pressure in millimeter Hg. Okay, so starting from 0 to 120. There are three things which they have shown in this graph. The lowermost dotted line is the atria. Okay, this is the atrium line. This regular line shows the ventricle, and this line on top is the aorta. Okay, now because we already studied that atria have thin muscles in their wall, they do not generate a lot of pressure. So if you see this line which is showing the pressure in the atria is always low, right? Because they don't need to generate a lot of pressure, they are receiving chambers. Ventricles are pumping chambers. So if you see the fluctuation in this line, the regular line, there's a lot of fluctuation. The pressure starts from 0, goes all the way up to 120, then again drops down, then goes below atria. So there's a lot of fluctuation. That is, a lot of pressure is generated because of the thick muscles that make the wall of the ventricles. Aorta is the major artery. So the pressure in the aorta is highest compared to any other arteries in our body. And also the walls of the aorta are thickest. Maximum muscles, maximum elastic tissue in the aorta if you compare to any other artery. Okay, so aorta pressure is this. So let's see how the cycle starts. So in the first, we are focusing on the first number over here. So what we see is the line. Which line is going up first? It is the atria, right? So in the first stage is when the atria contract. When atria contract, what will happen? Whenever any muscles contract, they will, the volume of the atria will decrease and the pressure will increase. When the pressure increases, because atria is connected to the ventricle, blood will be forced into the ventricle. So if the pressure in the atria, okay, let's compare the pressure. The pressure in the atria over here, if you see the dotted line is above the ventricle line. So if the pressure in the atria is greater than the ventricular pressure, then AV valves will be open at this time. Okay, so blood flows into the ventricle. As more and more blood is pumped into the ventricle, their pressure starts to rise, and second stage starts, which is the ventricular systole, where the ventricles contract. So when the ventricle muscles that make the wall of the ventricle, they contract, because there are a lot of muscles, a very high pressure is generated. And that is why you see the line is going up quickly, because the muscles contract and the volume decreases and pressure increases. And more muscles, so more pressure. So this, now over here, what will happen? As soon as the pressure in the ventricle increases more than the atria, the AV valves will close to prevent the backflow of blood from the ventricle to the atria. And over here, as soon as the pressure, when the ventricular pressure rises above the pressure in the aorta, this dotted line is aorta. Pressure in the ventricle is more than the aorta. So now the semilunar valve will open and the blood flows into the aorta. As blood flows into the aorta, the pressure in the aorta rises. See, the pressure in the aorta is rising. For as long as the pressure in the ventricle is more than aorta, the valves, semilunar valves, will remain open. After that, as the blood is carried away from the aorta, then the blood is carried away to the other artery, the pressure starts to decrease, and the third stage, which is when both the chambers, third stage is when both the chambers relax. So, atria relax as well as the ventricles relax. Both the atria and both the ventricles, they function simultaneously. So atria relax, ventricle relax. So the pressure in the ventricle is decreasing. Over here, as soon as the pressure in the ventricle goes below the aorta, the pressure in the aorta, semilunar valves will close over here. Okay, semilunar valves will close so that the blood from the aorta does not flow back to the ventricle, to prevent the backflow of blood. Now here, what will happen? Let's again compare the pressure of the atrium and the ventricle. So now the ventricular pressure is lower than the atria. So atrioventricular valve will open. So the blood, now the atria are already, they are receiving blood, and the blood will start to flow into the ventricle. Again, after this, the new cycle will start, which will start with the atrial contraction. So this thing repeats. So you have to just remember, the questions may be asked about when which valve will open, when which valve will close. You just have to think about the connecting chambers. Semilunar valves connect the ventricle to the artery. So whenever the pressure in the ventricle is more, it will open. But as soon as the pressure in the connecting artery rises, this semilunars will close. Same thing for atrioventricular. When the pressure in the atria is more, semilunar are open. When the pressure in the ventricle rises, these atrioventriculars will close. I hope the whole concept is clear. If you still have doubt, please write in the comment section. We can discuss, and I can make another video if you have not understood, or whichever part. If you have any topic in mind that you want me to make video on, please feel free to write in the comments.